Welcome to the Unstoppable Force podcast. I'm Guy.
And I'm Rob.
And today we're talking about the new Marvel movie, Spider-Man Far From Home.
Gonna be a full review. We're gonna do a small no spoiler section in the beginning, and then go into more of the details afterwards.
Mm-hmm. So let's jump right into it. I mean, first off, the movie is great.
Yeah. I keep thinking that these movies can't get any better, or we're gonna get fatigue. Oh no, what is it called? It's like superhero movie fatigue or whatever. Where we're gonna run out. But as long as I don't know, I guess Feige or whoever's behind this thing keeps it going.
Mm-hmm. I've always been curious how much Feige plays a part, because I know he's the producer of the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
and he probably does a lot of work. But at what point does he hand things off to other people to do it? Like, what percentage of his time is invested into movies like Far From Home that are sort of on the side, that aren't as big of a movie, but they're big in terms of the characters, the
Right.
specific characters.
I guess it's more like worrying about the character development that kind of flows between
Mm-hmm.
through the whole universe and kind of events that happen.
Right.
So if it's sort of isolated, you can have more hands off. It's like, oh, this isn't really gonna affect too many people, or if there's something important that changes what's gonna happen in the next movie,
Mm-hmm.
kind of needs to make sure that the thread is connected properly.
Right. And I think one actually big aspect of this movie going in that I didn't expect as much, and I thought it was going to be a little bit more greater, which was it was very self-contained until the end. And I think that's probably part of that design from movie to movie, where they're making sure that the movie itself can be watched without having seen any of the previous movies and be enjoyed. And it's it is self-contained. It has a full arc that completes, and then at the end they kind of bring us to that next step.
Right. I think that's kind of also how it is with these individual hero movies versus
Mm-hmm.
we get the Avengers arc where it doesn't have to be, it's not necessarily its own movie like we saw with Infinity War and then Endgame. It had its sort of own arc in there, but it
It
was
still
really
was
a bigger
very
thing.
heavy,
Right. So with
reliant on the previous movies.
right, so with the individual characters, they need this, standalone, so you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of watch it by itself and not need the other parts of the universe
Yeah,
really that much.
yeah. You could have never seen another Marvel movie, watched this, and been like, "Was that the first Spider-Man movie that they came out?" Or did there's a previous one? I mean, they kind of give you a little hint. They talk about how the situation with
Tony.
Iron Man,
Yeah.
yeah, and his family life changing, and his life outside of his personal life, and how it's changed as a
Yeah.
result of the Avengers.
Yeah, and they
They
have
kind of just touch on it at the beginning though, and then the rest of the whole movie was very much about the trip
yeah.
and just the friend group, and it was a very teen movie, a angsty kind of coming of
Yeah,
age.
like for us especially, it was like a throwback to high school type of,
Yeah.
like, oh, that happened, like that. It's like, kind of got to explain it like a little. It felt a little cringy to watch. It's like you see the characters, like what they're
Hmm.
saying or the decisions they're making. You're just like, oh, was
Kids
that
are cringy
me?
though,
Yeah, no, exactly.
they,
Like
they
that
did a
was
good job.
us. Oh my god. So it was like really good
Hmm.
with that aspect.
Yeah, I think recently a lot of movies have been doing a better job of showing uh teen, high school age, people and what they do a little better, and
Yeah.
being a little bit more kind of oh, these kids are actually, they're not as following these weird rules, but they just they run up to each other and punch each other in the balls, and they, one of them's got Flash filming himself and vlogging, and how relationships can quickly start and end, and there's just a lot of that kind of stuff, and I feel like it did a good job
Mm.
of when you watch it, and if you're part of a somewhat nerdy and group in school, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, yeah, no, that's not, that's it's cringy to watch, but at the same time, it's we did that
Oh
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, but then the action was fantastic as well.
Yeah. I honestly think that the action, in my opinion, was better than the action in the previous Spider-Man movie. I thought that the action in Homecoming it was pretty good. Like there wasn't like too much wrong with like the smaller fights, but
Hmm.
like the end fight in Homecoming was just like too flashy and movement like based. It was like kind
Yeah, it
of
was a little harder to
disorienting.
follow.
Yeah, I think this was better like it better fit like and was better choreographed. I think we had
Hmm.
like a sort of panned out view so you can kind of see what's going on better.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a different feel that they went for in this movie, which is like knowing all the information but never being able to like fully like ignore the way things seem to be, if that
Mm.
makes sense in like a spoiler free
Okay.
way.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like I think they wanted you, they give you those a lot of those wide shots so that you
Mhm.
can like see the positioning, but then have
Yeah.
like the characters themselves not be able to like always, reliably like get from point A to point B.
Hmm.
Um, but like overall, definitely, I thought it was a little better than Homecoming. I think the action was cooler. Like the
I mean
character
the
development was pretty, I think,
yeah.
pretty
I want to touch on
noticeable.
like with the action. I guess you would put in like the effects too because it's very heavily. This movie is very heavily based on special effects,
Yeah.
like crazy amount. And I don't there. I don't think there was a point that was taken out of the movie with the effects. It was all fantastic. It was
Hmm.
like perfect. It all like looked real within the world.
Right. Like they did a good job. It wasn't like weird. Like
Yeah,
there wasn't
exactly.
a spot where things were like, ooh.
Yeah, exactly. But
Um.
but yeah, with character development, we really got to see Spider-Man like he wanted his vacation and kind of just be a kid for a bit, and like the weight on his shoulders is just there's so much pressure from being an Avenger, and like he's the next Tony Stark. Like we get
Right.
like you even get a scene with like reporters just straight up asking him the question like, "How's it feel to be the next Iron Man?" And he just doesn't know what to say because he being put in this position that he like didn't really want to be in.
Um. But I think like overall, what would you say like that you felt of the movie?
I would give this a 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10.
Yeah.
I feel like it was like an 8.75 or like an
Okay.
8.9, but not quite a 9 for me.
I don't know. I mean, just even like with the acting, like Jake Gyllenhaal, he's just a great actor, and like
Hmm.
he fit into this universe so damn well. Like he was just part of it, like
Yeah.
crazy. Like obviously Tom Holland's amazing at being Peter Parker, and the
Hmm.
whole like kids like act like the whole cast of like the
Yeah, and
teens.
Zendaya being
Yeah,
MJ.
yeah, just everything.
Hmm.
So I think that really I think a lot of it was like really improved. I think this movie improved greatly on what we had in Homecoming. Honestly,
Hmm. So getting like more into the spoilers half
so
now.
here's your warning.
Yeah, so this is the warning before we kind of move into the spoiler half. Um, but like I kind of want to first just go overall some of those mentions, the things that we mentioned in a little more detail with spoilers. Like specifically too for me, the one part where I mentioned how like the way that they choreographed, I think, and filmed the fight sequences was like you knew they would kind of pan between Jake Gyllenhaal's version of reality
Yeah,
and then Spider-Man's version of
yeah,
reality and like their relation to each other and where they were,
yeah.
which I thought was like really cool.
Oh yeah, yes.
Um, but basically, like Mysterio is the bad guy here, obviously, and
Oh
he's
yeah,
using the CG on the drones. And I thought that that was like a really cool effect that they kind of used to make the movie feel different than previous movies.
yeah. I think that they really gave us something that was like you said, different. That's why like when you see Spider-Man trying to fight the elementals and he's like trying to web it and just like gets like basically shot from what we
Hmm.
see basically like it looks like it just like burns off or whatever the webbing and you're just like what the heck and then it comes like when you see the inside of all of the drones like projecting everything it's like
Yeah,
he's not fighting this one thing it's just all these drones he has to like go around and fight at the same time.
it was definitely like a really. I mean, especially with the whole fact that you were sort of you knew Mysterio was going to be the bad
Yeah,
guy.
if you knew Mysterio as a character you knew he was going to be the bad guy. That's why
Hmm.
they had basically a small movie like within this movie where you had the whole like they fought like elemental. The first one, like, oh no, like experiencing the elemental right where they're in the beginning of the movie, like, oh, introduced to Mysterio. Then like like a probably like a quarter of the way in or whatever, there's another one where where they're vacationing,
Yeah.
right in Venice, the water. So that's the introduction to the elemental, and then that's defeated. That's like, oh, we have the big one that's gonna threaten the whole world if we don't destroy it. And
Yeah.
then they defeat it, and it's like, oh, there's your little conclusion between Spider-Man and Mysterio. Now he has his trust, and like, oh, we're gonna tie us up a nice bow. Like everybody's kind of happy.
Hmm.
Then he gives him Edith, and it just pans around, and then you're like, yep, this is the like twist we were like looking
Right.
for.
It was like at some point you kind of were like, is Mysterio going to be the bad guy for this movie? Like, are they going to push this off, or are they going to bring him into another movie later? Like, are they going to switch it on us and like have it? And then when he was like, "Oh, I'm going to give you Edith," it was like, okay,
Oh
this is not turning out well.
yeah,
I can see what the plan is here.
I thought I was almost 100. I was 100% sure he was going to be the villain. I didn't know how they were gonna do it, whether or not they wanted to actually have a multiverse or not. Like they were kind of teasing in the trailers, like,
Hmm.
oh, he's from another world, and that means there's a multiverse, and everybody's hyping up like, oh, that's real. And I'm like, he could just be lying and just saying
He
that he's from
is.
the multiverse.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know if they were gonna have him be a bad guy from another like universe, or just be from Earth and say he's from another universe.
Right. Like I wasn't sure if it was going to be like I knew he was still obviously a bad guy, but like was it going to be more complex than just Mysterio is a lying con man who's able to use like illusions or like
Yeah,
special effects or whatever to
yeah,
convince everybody. And I really like how the writers they kind of took the MCU and then Mysterio and then kind of made it work in a way where it's like, "Oh yeah, that makes so much sense." Like,
yeah,
okay, they're using the barf from Tony, and then
yeah.
it was like, oh, he was the one who
Mm.
helped design it,
Yeah.
and like these are all these
Mm.
people that Iron Man screwed over, and they like built Mysterio out of
Yeah.
the previous Marvel movies, and it just made it work.
Yeah, I just don't think that his motivation, like, I mean, I understand because he just always wants to be a hero and like famous or whatever because
Hmm.
nobody gets he doesn't get recognition. Reminds me of Extremis, I think, right from Iron Man 3. What's his name? That was really the Mandarin. Like the guy,
Oh
he just
right,
wanted to be, talk to Tony and get his projects, and then he finally did the thing.
yeah, they kind
It's
of.
very like similar to that, and I think that that motivation isn't as strong,
Mhm.
and it doesn't really give us like that connection to the villain. But I really
He was just
like,
kind of like douchey
yeah,
almost.
but it's still like was cool to see how he was doing everything, and
Yeah.
he was even douchey to the people he was working with.
Yeah, he was a douche, but at the same time, he was like very clever
Yeah,
and very
right.
smart. Had a lot of like plans to
Mm.
back up his like main plan, and different tricks he would have up his sleeve. And then the planning that would go into all the things that he did was very obvious how much planning it was.
Oh yeah, I liked how they had him not actually really be there, and it just be like a projection of
Hmm.
him, and I didn't really think about that. I was like flying, and then it's like, oh no, they just made him like when they revealed the projector, and it's like, oh, they just projected that he's flying, like he's not even there.
Yeah, and then if he talks, then I think it like
Yeah, he has like his helmet that he's kind of like
well, I
going
guess like
through.
the drones, I guess, are
Right.
like it's like a speaker that probably
Yeah.
has like
Yeah, exactly. That's
control
what
where to
all
hear from.
the all the drones have the speaker, and then like anything tries to kind of like touch it, like it kind of knows to prevent it from doing that, or
Right.
all the real destruction is shooting things basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think like one thing that I felt was that there was a little bit of like far-fetchedness in the idea of these drones being able to perfectly mimic, like water and
Mm.
like how are they doing like a lot of the different things that they do. I think that it's still like such a cool concept that it's very easily like dismissed,
Yeah.
because you just want to enjoy the movie.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Um,
you can just really say that like Tony Stark's tech is just so
yeah.
good, right? And all this stuff. Like he has holograms. If he can do that, why can't we just project to make it look like it has like?
Yeah, I mean, like, pretty much any question can just kind of be answered with, dude, they have the tech to make holograms look perfect and anywhere. Like, might as well just assume they can do
Yeah,
everything
I
else.
mean, you just said yourself they had it in Barf, right, from the
Right.
previous movie, so they can just Why
But
that
I
way?
mean, just like the idea of like water actually flooding a house, but then the water's a hologram, or is it not? Does that mean that the drones are
Hmm.
carrying water? Like, you know what I
Gotcha.
mean? Like,
Like,
there's
oh, that's true. Like when in Venice, when there's all the like water kind of going up,
right.
that type of stuff.
Yeah, and then also like, I mean, I don't know how much like the melting part is fake, but like when the molten guy crashes into
Metal.
a carousel, like how do they is there a bunch of drones floating inside holding it like and then
It's
making it
just
an illusion of it melting outside?
yeah.
So I'm just saying like we don't get to see
Hmm.
that extra layer of like are they picking up all the rubble they destroy, or like if the creature is absorbing something, do they have to pick up the things that it's absorbing and
Hmm.
like fill in the
I figured they're
empty
just
space?
destroying it, kind of. Maybe that is. Maybe that's why when it's growing, quote unquote growing, it's
Hmm.
just you know holding it inside there and it's getting bigger. But it's kind of a waste of a drone. But
Right. So I'm just like wondering because there's definitely a lot more logistics other than just making something look like something and then destroying stuff.
yeah.
Because it's like if you like throw your arm and you're supposed to have like lava coming off of your arm and pieces of
Mm.
lava fly across and hit a
Mm.
wall and they harden and look like lava, then a drone could never like
Right. It wouldn't be left
replicate
there
that.
later. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanna, like that's one suspension of disbelief that we have. But the other one, which is kind of funny, is the idea that these kids are on vacation on a school like trip
Hmm.
that keeps getting replanned, and then they go to a place that got attacked, then they get planned, and there's another place that gets attacked, and this thing just didn't get canceled. Everybody goes
Right.
home. It's like, oh, they were gonna go home, but now they're getting rerouted to go to like London or whatever, and it's just like, okay, like this is the most crazy
Hmm.
thing that's happening.
Honestly though, like when you see those teachers that are in charge of them, like starts to make a little more sense.
Yeah,
And you're
but
just like,
it's not that the teachers. It's like the school. The parents would call and have their kids phone home like immediately. Just
yeah, I think
parents by
parents would
themselves,
just be
and or
freaking
the
out.
school itself. It's not like the teachers. The school would be getting calls from the parents, and the school would be like, "No, get everybody home right now."
Yeah, I think
But
like at the beginning when there was the well, the water attack I don't think was a big enough reason for them to leave. But the like the water monster thing.
no,
But when the lava one hit
yeah.
and his friend whose
Oh,
name I'm
Ned.
Ned, yeah. And his Ned's girlfriend like
Yeah,
basically were inches from dying.
yeah,
Um that would probably be the point when you would like have a parent probably going like,
yeah,
"My kid almost died." Like you have to bring them home. Like if somebody's kid almost dies, they're
yeah.
not going to continue to go on
Exactly,
that trip. Yeah.
exactly.
Unless the kids just lie to their parents and just not tell them. And everyone's just like, "Oh, they almost got hurt, but
Mm.
it was not a big deal. Like, we can keep going." So,
I
yeah, no,
really
that's definitely
liked
crazy.
like the scenes when Peter doesn't know like if it's real or not, and like what all the
Right, like the
illusions. That
dream
was cool. Like
sequences
even like
almost.
the because then the viewer doesn't know, and then when Nick Fury comes up and he's like, "Who'd you tell? You need to tell me who you told. He's gonna kill everybody." And
Hmm.
then Peter still kind of didn't learn to not trust everything around him, and he tells him
Yeah.
who he told, and it's just Mysterio anyway. Like, I don't know, that was cool. Like it was a layer, it was like double layered like that, and then he gets hit
Hmm.
by the freaking train, like when he's in illusion.
Yeah.
So like I kind of like he was still his character kind of still trusting in other people up until like that point, kind of. Because then when he had to call Happy to call him home, he's like, "Tell me something only you know." Like that was obviously a funny scene, but it's like, all right, you need to learn who to trust
Right.
now, and you need to like figure this out. Like he kind of in that moment realized that not only did he screw up, but the reason why he screwed up
Hmm.
is because he keeps trusting people.
Yeah, I think this movie was I think kind of dark in a weird way for Spider-Man and his character development in that, is coming off the heels of Iron Man dying. He feels like he's got a lot of big shoes to fill and he's like thrust into this situation where he's supposed to be trying to be a hero, but then he's also trying to not, trying to be a normal kid and trying to take a break from the whole hero thing because it's just I think it's kind of like affecting him negatively. Um, and then he gets manipulated and controlled by Mysterio, and then he gets basically like psychologically tortured by Mysterio,
Yeah.
and he has to almost like, on top of having to deal with the death of Iron Man, is now, or like of Tony, is now having to basically deal with a person who's lying to him and has to like learn to not trust people at face value. But that can also be something kind of negative too. It's like a less trustworthy Spider-Man,
Yeah.
a less, like a more kind of darker Spider-Man. um, who knows, like what the next couple like movies might hold, but I think it's not entirely. It could be seen as just like a positive growing moment for him,
Hmm.
like of like becoming more mature and realizing that not everyone's good and not everyone's
Hmm.
bad, and that there's like a lot of different types of people, and you kind of have to keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah.
Or we could see him kind of continue like to become less trustworthy, or like because now he's kind of got ousted as well,
Yeah.
and I think he's going to have to deal with that,
Oh
and
yeah.
the consequences of that I think might fuck with him quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it kind of went from like it wasn't really. It was like a extreme, but like he was already trying to not be Spider Man
Right.
and go on vacation. But now that everybody will know who he is, he can't go anywhere to be on vacation.
Yeah.
So he like the whole thing he wanted to do. That's just that got taken away from him entirely.
Mhm.
Like him, like Peter Parker and Spider Man are one thing now, and he has to watch out everywhere. He can't basically go out in public.
And he just started the relationship with MJ,
Yeah.
so that's
So
going to be like super
mm,
difficult too.
yeah.
And I mean, we've seen MJ get messed up in previous
Mm,
Spider-Man movies,
yeah.
and then like obviously Gwen Stacy died.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if we see MJ in future
Or
movies
in
be a
danger.
target.
Yeah, it was actually kind of funny when at the end when they're going on a date and he's like swinging around and he picks her up and then he swings with MJ and then she goes, "Oh, I'm never doing that again." And I don't know if I turned to my friend and I said, "Oh, that's gonna happen in the next movie when she gets picked up in somewhere, and then he's gonna have to go get her and pick her up from whoever villain's gonna be
Hmm.
having her." I'm like, this is gonna happen again.
Yeah, they're
Like,
like setting
it's like
us up.
reverse foreshadowing. Where like, oh, that's I guess that's foreshadowing, kind of, where she's never gonna do it voluntarily, but that's gonna happen. That's my
Right.
opinion. And then I on like the whole MJ thing is I really like that they wrapped that up because you had a like teen like a kid like Peter Parker like just, oh, I have this plan, I'm gonna tell her how I feel, like the whole nervousness, not really knowing what to do, not knowing that she actually liked him.
Hmm.
And then I liked how like it was so cringy, like the scene in the opera when he's like, oh yeah, I'll get a pair for both of us, and then he had to leave and just leave her, and I was just like, dude, did that the chances every time it just gets more and more screwed for
Yeah.
this to happen. And I'm glad they finally like make them a thing, and I think it's gonna be really good because they kind of play off each other really well. Like she messes with him a lot, but now
Hmm.
it's gonna be he kind of understands that she's just messing with him, and he won't take it too
Hmm.
seriously because he's not too nervous anymore. He's just
Right.
kind of around her, and it'll be a little bit better.
Like he feels more confident
Yeah,
in her liking
yeah,
him, that he won't feel as like thrown off by her comments.
yeah, exactly.
Hmm. Yeah, I think like the teen movie like level of this movie, kind of like this. I wouldn't even call it a subplot. I would call it like one of the two main plots. Because I think it played like a really big part, which is like you said, the trip and the kids and Ned finding his girlfriend, who's, I don't actually remember
I
her
don't know.
name
I don't
either.
remember her name either.
But like then the whole story with like the guy who was blipped and is like 5 years older.
Yeah.
Which by the way was kind of confusing. I think they explained that really weirdly, or
Yeah,
they were
they kind of
saying,
said it. It sounded like they said it backwards, kind
yeah,
of.
it was the people who stayed that aged 5 years, and the people who came back that didn't age at all.
Right.
So I think they may have just kind
But
of like
they're in
retconned
this.
it so that the movie worked, and they may have just realized it didn't work, and they
I
just kind of
I
changed it.
think they made it work because the whole point is that anybody that went blipped away, they came back to the same age,
Yeah, but
right?
that's not what they
So
said here. They
yes,
said that the people who blipped away grew
no,
five
no.
years.
No, because Peter Parker's the same
Yeah,
age.
and so are all of his friends and
They happen to
classmates.
blip away. That's what they're saying is explaining that. And that was
Hmm.
something that people were thinking before. It was like, oh, if Spider-Man, blipped away and then we see his friends later, like is everybody like did the whole school just get blipped and then like that's just unlucky for them? So like it just happened to be the ones that we see, the ones that get
Well,
blipped.
when they were
But
kind of describing the Asian guy who was kind of like the other love interest, they were saying how like people who got blipped like aged 5 years or whatever, and then like the dynamic seemed as if like he was the fresher or newer one,
okay,
not the other way around. And he didn't seem like he never talked about how he was around for the 5 years that nobody was alive. Like he didn't mention any of that, and it seemed like they like you had said it. You or like right when I mentioned it, you said that it almost sounded like they said it backwards, and I think they did.
maybe I didn't catch it, but from
It's
what it
definitely
seemed.
something to like rewatch for.
But I thought that the reason that he's good looking now is because he aged and he had all this time and everybody comes back, right?
Hmm.
He was younger than them, but now he's their age. So
Right.
now he's in their grade.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It was a kid that was in a younger grade is now in their grade. That's why he's in their class now.
No, yeah, I think that it would make sense within the realms of the version that they gave us in like Endgame. But what I'm saying is that if I remember correctly, the way that they described it and executed on it in Spider-Man Far From Home, it gave the feeling that it was the other way around, if that makes sense. Like not that it was, or like if they did it wrong, or we could have
No,
just
I
misheard at the
I didn't
beginning.
feel that. I
Because he was the newcomer, he was like the outsider, and then all of the people that were already in the grade originally were seemed like nothing had ever happened. So it could be that they got unlucky and everyone disappeared, but that's what I'm saying. It's like you can tell that they've done some writing
uh,
magic
yeah,
to just make it work so that the film made sense, which I don't care about. But
right.
I noticed at the beginning when they mentioned like the Asian guy, and I was like, that sounds kind of backwards, but I don't really care. I'm just gonna roll with it.
I didn't really catch it. Yeah, it definitely worked.
Hmm. Um, but like the other thing I definitely wanted to talk about was the implications of the end of the movie,
Yeah,
because other than the end of the movie, the whole movie was very self-contained. Mysterio dies
yeah,
essentially, and that
yeah.
all ends.
I just want to say one thing before
Yeah.
we get into this. I really liked um that ending scene when he's like talking and because Spider-Man has to like close his eyes, uses his Peter
Hmm.
Tingle,
Yeah, the
and
Peter Tingle.
that was sick. But then like when he's like talking to him and then Mysterio goes to shoot him, you hear a gunshot. Like, you see Spider-Man grab and there's a gunshot. I was just like, that was like pretty badass. I was
Yeah.
just like, damn, that was some shit.
Because like even we thought it was over right there,
Yeah,
and that he just got shot by his own drone,
or
and
something. Yeah.
it made a lot of sense. And then like boom, he's not actually the one who got shot, and
Mhm.
his like yeah, that was cool.
Those were badass. And then so after that concluded, then we have footage from J. Jonah Jameson
Yes.
that shows that allegedly shows that Spider-Man was doing all the drone. That's what Mysterio says, that Spider-Man had controlled the drones,
Yeah.
was killing people, and then he killed the Spider-Man killed Mysterio,
Right.
right? They like execute, all that. And on top of that, he reveals that Spider-Man is Peter Parker.
Hmm. And that's gonna like I think completely. I mean, honestly, that's not even just the only implication of the end, because then we also have
Well,
like the
so
whole post-credit
yeah,
scene,
so I
and
think we could
um, but that's kind
just
of like that. We'll get to that next, but
mhm.
just on that alone, I think that that is going to completely change the MCU. I think that one thing, the reveal of Spider-Man, I think is going to cause some sort of effect throughout the superhero community of perception of heroes and identities and hidden identity versus open identity, and like how he's going to have to completely change his life now essentially because everybody knows he's Spider-Man. Um and on top of that, like his personal relationships, his like everything is changes once your secret identity is
Yeah.
gone.
He doesn't have like the billionaire status like Tony, because like Tony Stark and Iron Man kind of had that where like, oh, I am Iron Man. He kind of revealed it in the first movie,
Hmm.
and he was able to handle that because that's how he is. But Peter Parker, he didn't want that. This was thrust upon him, and like dealing with that is gonna be a whole new situation. And I think maybe he'll have to be sort of the head of Avengers, being that guy. Be like,
Hmm.
you guys need to be with me, and like you need to be who I call because this thing that I had going on where I can just pretend to not exist doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely a very like the vibe I'm getting from the way the MCU is handling Spider-Man is that it's very much like a young innocent kid has these powers and isn't just like he doesn't just have to figure it out, but he gets thrust time and time again into situations far beyond his own ability and he gets just thrashed around in order to learn anything. And it's like even at the end of this movie, you can kind of tell that the next movie he's going to be in is going to be a continuation of that thrashing of Spider-Man because it's like he like literally died. I
Mm.
mean, he
Yeah,
he went into space and he had to fight this guy who's like conning him who like almost killed everybody he cared about um and then at the very end is still screwed over, blamed and framed and revealed,
yeah,
and he like just got this girlfriend who's now going to be a target.
yeah. And we have from the previous movie we had Scorpion. So at the end of the credits, because he put Scorpion in jail, and then
Hmm.
he had Vulture that went to prison too. And Scorpion asks Vulture, "Do you know the identity of Spider-Man?" And he goes, "No. If I did, I would tell you." So I don't know if that's gonna something's gonna happen in prison within like the beginning of the first, like the next movie. I mean, um, but now, like Scorpion wanted to know who Spider Man is, and now that's what he gets. Anybody
Yeah.
that Spider Man put into jail, now we're gonna get those guys to do that, and it could be that Norman Osborn
Hmm.
could be. There's a rumor that he's like the bad baddie of Earth, right in the next phase. So
Oh,
that
really?
yeah,
That's
it's
gonna be
it's
cool.
like pseudo confirmed, right? So it's like
Hmm.
a pseudo reliable source that basically. So now that his identity is revealed, we might have basically Norman Osborn. We're gonna have Scorpion. Maybe Vulture comes back and have them look for Peter Parker because now they know
Hmm.
he's Spider Man.
Well, I definitely don't think that Vulture is going to be an enemy of Spider-Man. It seemed like they had ended
Yeah,
on like a good term. Like he did save Vulture's life.
yeah, he's
He
probably like
treated his
retired now.
daughter.
Yeah,
Yeah, and he never got into the business because he was a bad guy. He
like
got
he
into the business because he was trying to
making
provide for
money.
his
Yeah,
family.
exactly. He didn't like find Spider Man to be the bad guy. Spider Man was just in his way of doing things. It's not
Yeah.
like he picked Spider Man.
Um. So I mean, I definitely do think though that kind of following suit from the original Raimi's, I feel like the third Spider-Man is going to be a darker Spider-Man. I think it might be kind of cool to like see him, being like I kind of mentioned, like less trusting, but then like have something happen with MJ, and then that could like throw him into like a darker place because that would be kind of a cool thing. But then it also, with all the enemies that he's gonna have too, it could end up being like a Spider-Man 3 where he's got
Yeah,
three different enemies and
maybe.
it's darker.
Mm.
Like, that would be kind of interesting if it ended up being like that. But I definitely would be surprised if the MCU decided to do like the three villains in a single movie mistake that Amazing Spider-Man killed itself on and
Yeah,
Raimi's
yeah.
Spider-Man's
I
killed
think
itself
I
on.
think the MCU is good at doing that slow burn where they
Hmm.
set up the next one or the overall
Yeah.
like villain. So maybe they'll introduce one that's connected to another one, and then kind of does that where there's an
Hmm.
overarching enemy that's like behind all of this, but it's not gonna be like all three at once. You.
It would be kind of interesting if at some point the MCU in general moves towards like a Legion of Doom like squad of like bad guys that are now grouping up together.
Yeah.
Because I think that at this point we need something more than just like a Thanos, a singular power to make it make sense and to be cool and like new for like another big huge monumental battle slash like
Yeah.
epic moment in the MCU to like kind of bring it to that next stage.
Yeah, if they can connect like villains within each individual movie, and at the end have the Avengers fight like a team of villains instead of like
Mhm.
one guy with an army. I like, yeah, I like to see like 6 or 7 like
Yeah.
villains that we've seen along the way. But the problem is the MCU kills its villains. We just killed Mysterio.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter. That's what happens. We lose these villains. Maybe that's good because their whole character arc is one movie worth, and that's it. Yeah, maybe they weren't redeemable, but Vulture was kind of redeemable because he's like, "Oh, I learned my lesson. It wasn't about the kid. It was just about me making money. Like
Yeah.
surviving off of this." So, like, he is not gonna come back. So the character is essentially dead to us because we don't see him unless something crazy happens and he needs to come back. And if anything, it might just be to help Spider-Man in a situation where it's threatening his family.
Mhm. It would be kind of epic if they could even take like an extra step and like make some super villain movies too. Like introducing some villains and
Oh,
like
like
making
Venom?
a kind of like Venom, yeah. Um but Venom's not technically part of the MCU, is
No,
he?
that was just like a Sony like.
Yeah.
Only Spider-Man was given like shared now by Marvel and Sony. So
Right.
that's why it's still Sony, but it's under Marvel Studios. But I don't think Venom is. Maybe.
They could
But I
integrate him
think
at some
they
point.
I think it's because Sony has access to these. Like, theoretically, Sony could just make a Spider-Man movie, I think, and make it separate from the MCU. And only if it's made by Marvel Studios, it's in the MCU.
Yeah.
I think that's how it is. So Sony can make the Venom movie separate from Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, but I feel like if someone tried to make a super or Spider-Man movie at this point,
Oh, it would
it
be
would not go over well.
no.
People would just be like, "Dude, just stick with the MCU
Well,
version.
yeah,
Everyone likes that one the
right. I mean,
most."
I'm not saying that this is what they're gonna do. I'm just saying they have the ability to do that
Mhm.
because of the way that they split the rights.
Honestly, though, it is really impressive how well they did this Peter Parker compared to like Raimi's and Amazing Spider-Man's. Like both of those were kind of like, But I mean, like
Not
Raimi's, I
really.
think were better than Amazing
Oh
for
yeah, Amazing
sure.
Spider-Man was just a pretty boy. That made me
Yeah.
so mad. But
Honestly, both of those movies were pretty bad. And when you rewatch them,
not really. No,
like
Spider-Man, like the first Spider-Man was not that bad.
no, I'm saying
Like the
the
third,
Amazing ones.
Amazing ones. Oh yeah, yeah.
Like when
Those movies.
they're not rewatchable. They're
No.
like cringe.
Oh
Like
yeah.
you just like, why did the eels in a fucking vat just make this dude a superhero? Like that makes no sense. Why? How? What? None of it made any sense. Both the first and second one were weird.
Yeah.
Raimi's though are like an arc. Like at
Hmm.
least there's character growth and development, and he's a nerdy kid who finds himself in some
Yeah.
capacity
Yeah.
and overcomes things. But like, so those are good. I like those. And those are definitely rewatchable, and they're very campy.
Yeah.
They're very fun.
So we had that one sort of ending that was between like the mid credits, but then we had the end credits after all of the credits, right?
Hmm.
And that was um revealing that the Nick Fury and Maria Hill
Yeah.
were just scrolls, and the real Nick Fury was in space with scrolls just hanging out, not he's not doing anything. And it kind of explained the why the Nick Fury we saw in this movie was like
More
duped, yeah,
gullible.
more gullible, and like kind of fell for the Mysterio in the way that the real Nick Fury would absolutely not have done. So I thought it made like seeing that end credit. I felt weird about the whole movie afterwards. I'm like thinking back on it, I'm like, okay, you just explained why everyone was so stupid, but like, and now you're making me question, why is Nick Fury there? What are we gonna do for the next thing with these scrolls? Like something's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like that's cool, but I just thought the movie, like knowing that they're scrolls, just I don't know, it feels weird to me.
It definitely felt weird, and I think like it played into part of for me that I think that made the movie like a little weird feeling afterwards. Like when it closed, I was like, I enjoyed it a lot, and there was a lot of really good things, but there was like a weird feeling you get from it, and it was like I think just like the fact that it was so self-contained and it was like very built feeling. I think it like you could kind of tell
They had
like
answers for everything. Like they set it up
yeah
just right, so that, like just certain situations go down, right? Kind of.
Yeah, it had all the answers, but you could tell that they were like they fit, but they didn't fit like really well. They were
Yeah.
kind of like they made the house, but the house was like a little rickety, and it was like kind of this like weird feeling where you liked it a lot, but something just didn't feel. It felt like a off, I
Yeah.
guess, and I think that that kind of plays into it when they like kind of turn back in, and it's like, yeah, I guess that, like, it's because they needed that they needed a Nick Fury that wasn't going to be as smart to
Yeah.
set this up,
Yeah.
so that could have like played into this idea of like, oh, let's make them scrolls, and then like, oh, but when we have this situation with Nick, or like, I don't know what they're doing with the scrolls
Yeah.
going into these next movies, but they probably have like some big thing they're doing with that too.
Yeah.
Um, but like, what is the next? Because this is the bridge.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be like not really
Phase 4.
phase 4 and not really phase 3.
Yeah.
So I think like the mixture of revealing Spider-Man and then this like sort of scroll plot that they're introducing, that's like the main
Focus.
focus for the beginning at least of
Yeah.
phase 4.
We don't like have a really like a movie that I could pin that like most movies could involve Nick Fury, right? But there's none that I see that is like just might be like having the scrolls in it, like it like being part of a movie, because like the next phase, the phase 4 movies we're getting is Black Widow, The Eternals, Doctor Strange 2.
Wait, the Black Widow one is obviously just a
And
prequel, so
right,
that's
and
not
that's
gonna
just a
matter.
prequel, so that's just gonna be back,
And then the Eternals.
that's that could have um the scrolls in it, but I'm not exactly sure. But Black Panther 2 and Guardians Volume 3, which is in space, it could have them, but
Guardians is definitely gonna have scrolls in it.
yeah, I figure, I guess. I
I
don't know.
feel like it's gonna.
It's just leaving us with this question where it's just like, oh yeah, we know the scrolls are there. Thanks again. Like, and we know Nick Fury became kind of friends with them. Thanks again. Like, it kind of didn't really set
Right.
anything up. It just gave us a band-aid for this movie. I think that it
Right.
didn't really.
So I guess it's a question of like, is this a band-aid for the movie, or is this telling us or hinting to us that the scrolls are going to play a large part in Phase 4?
Yeah.
And then like, that's only the beginning of Phase 4, right? The movies that you went through, or is that all of Phase 4?
That's what's announced by title, like right now.
Because I feel like there's definitely got to be another.
There's like an
Avengers.
untitled, like unknown Avengers one that we don't know what they're gonna do with yet.
Okay.
Like, that's gonna happen. We just don't know what it is.
And it's probably just going to be like kind of breadcrumb trail throughout the next couple movies that are going to give us like a little bit more information about what the big picture is going to be here.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like the prequel of Black Widow is also going to have some sort of information that's relevant towards a like a future Avenger movies or something.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
But it could be like an origin of a villain that we're gonna see.
Right, like maybe she, like you mentioned, Norman Osborn. Maybe we'll see in the prequel a young Norman Osborn and like her interacting with him, and maybe her doing something that maybe set him down a path that he ultimately leads to him being the bad guy he is in the future movies.
Right.
So it'll definitely be interesting to see like where they're gonna go from here. But just as a movie on its own, I think this was really good.
Oh, yeah, I think it was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Or spectacular.
Yeah. But I think that about wraps it up.
Yeah.
Let us know what you guys think. Did you guys like the movie? What would you rate it?
Yeah. Did you think it was better than the previous Spider-Man? Did it disappoint?
I mean, like, what do you guys also think about this kind of being the bridge as well, and what we have in store, what we should expect?
Yeah. Does it show like a positive direction we're gonna move it to?
Mm-hmm. Is Spider-Man going to take a darker turn? Is he going to take a lighter turn because now he's with MJ?
Yeah, are we afraid of getting another Spider-Man 3 or Amazing Spider-Man 2?
Yeah, because it definitely seems like he's going to have more than one villain to deal with.
Yeah.
In the next movie he's in. So, so let us know what you guys think, and
as always, thank you for listening and following.
Check us out every Thursday on YouTube, Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, anywhere podcasts are available.
You can find us on Instagram at Unstoppable Force Podcast and Twitter at UForcePod for news and updates.
We'll see you guys next week. And until then, stay unstoppable.